Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast dedicated to helping creative entrepreneurs thrive. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. Today, I'm excited to introduce Matthew Fox to the show. Matthew is a seasoned project leader, trainer, and operations consultant who's passionate about helping teams work better together. With a strong background in project management and technology implementation, he's no stranger to leading cross-functional teams, mentoring talent, and delivering training that sparks real action and change. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Steve. I'm excited to be here and thrilled to dig in.
I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to dig in. We're going to talk about conscious leadership as it relates to agency ownership and project management, and that's kind of an area of expertise for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. I have been passionate about the general topic of self-development for decades. In the last 10 years have really doubled down to not only understand my role, but to understand how these tools and how this process can benefit your organization and each individual in the organization.
Let's go back 10 years. What sparked this passion for these tools and learning about it and implementation in your life?
Yeah, in a bit of self-disclosure and vulnerability, I very much have had and have a script that I continue to work on of something about me is wrong or something about me is not enough. I later found out some people will label that as imposter syndrome, or it's actually a very human type thing to feel that it was a message that we may have picked up at some point when we were children, and through a series of a variety of events as when I was younger, that was one of the messages I picked up. So regardless of the success that I would have around me, I was always striving and pushing to say, okay, well, that's great that this project went well, or that's great that I had success in this area, but there's something missing. It's still not enough.
Yeah. So if even the positive of life experiences presents that way, what do or did the negative, we'll label them negative, you lose a client, you lose the T-ball game, what did that do to that same, imposter syndrome?
Oh, yeah. It's like fuel. It was feeding it, in the sense that I was very much under the delusion when I was younger that essentially if something was going wrong in the world, I had something to do with it. If we had lost a client, if a project wasn't going the way it was supposed to, if someone didn't understand what I was saying, I always took too much ownership or too much responsibility for the way I was showing up, for my impact on others, for just all the things going on around me. Mm-hmm. And it was very exhausting.
Yeah. Interesting. So at what point did you find ways to kind of integrate this work into the agency space or connect it with the agency world for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I originally got my agency exposure through a company called Arc Worldwide. They were an affiliate of Leo Burnett. This is, 15 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. And no matter what I did, no matter how I showed up, things just didn't feel like they were working. And I stumbled for probably a good 7 years after that. And then I found my way to something called Men's Work with the Mankind Project. And that was my first exposure to understanding, how I'm showing up, what the impact on the world is like, and if I wanted to continue to show up that way. And then as I deepened my relationship, not only with myself, but with that type of work, I found out about things like the 15 Commitments to Conscious Leadership and another group that I've trained with called Crafted Leadership.
I don't know either of those. They're both new to me. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And so so did you left that agency and now you're doing this on your own, consulting for a while, working with agencies on implementation and teamwork review, and what other
It
sorts of things you're digging into?
Yeah, it's a variety of things. One, I have developed a platform in the project management space and have spoken to quite a few project managers. I believe that project managers are essentially the ones that are like the small business owners of a business.
Yeah.
And if you've got 3 or 4 project managers working in your agency, or even one project manager, they're the ones that are going to identify the cultural things before just about anyone in the organization. As an
Mm,
owner, you may not be in touch with them right away because you're busy closing new deals, you're busy running the agency. Hopefully, you're not working too much in it and you're
right.
focused working on it. But with that in mind, PMs are where I've spent a lot of time. And then in addition to that, I've gone into other agencies to talk about emotional awareness and really the somatic side of conscious leadership, which is definitely something that I think, regardless of the individual or the agency owner, really allows a deeper understanding not only of the self, but what others may be going through as well.
So your kind of theory, and I fully align with this, is the PMs have their finger on the pulse of really what's going on because they're managing the day to day with clients, with the components of the team, the delivery, the production, copy,
Exactly.
whatever. So they've got their finger on the pulse, and that's
Mhm.
not just the status of the work, but that's the status of the people that are involved in it. And
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think the success of projects are a reflection of agency operations. So if our
hmm
projects aren't going well, it's most likely a symptom of a bigger cultural challenge within the agency. For example, there's a concept in conscious leadership that is based off the Karpman drama triangle. And it's this idea of a victim, villain, hero. And a lot of the times, I speak from a lot of experience here, we as PMs can get on a drama triangle with others on the team. For example, we're trying to get projects delivered on time, on budget, within scope.
hmm
And if the team is falling behind, we might villainize them, or we may look at them as the problem without understanding that it may be something else. And the beautiful thing about this work is it takes it out of an individual perspective and looks at it more as outside the individual. So we may be doing the work itself, but we can actually identify that, hypothetically, like if you're the developer, Steve, instead of pointing a finger at you, I can take a step back and say, oh, wow, like I'm noticing something is happening inside of me. And I want to make you the villain, or I want to make you the victim of
yep.
why things are going wrong. And I've seen agency owners do this as well, where they'll look at some type of rift between teams and assume it's the individual members without identifying it's actually a cultural issue.
So, all right, so back up a little bit. So the PM's
Yep.
got their finger on it. They're able to identify this triangle, of who's playing what role, how do they show up, how do the team members show up. How does an owner put
Mhm.
themselves in that situation, or do you not even think they should? They should let it be resolved by the PM because it's a cultural issue now, and it's affecting more than just the delivery.
I think it is a contextual piece.
hmm
So, for example, let's say you and I are in an agency together. You're the owner. I'm running the project. If
hmm
I've got the skill set to know and identify when I've entered into that triangle with other people on the team, and I can, what my mentor Julie Caldwell likes to talk about is dropping the rope, where there'll be this tension or push between the other team. And if I can let go of that rope and identify that, okay, this is what's happening, um, and or from a leadership perspective, if you come in and you say, hey, what's going on between project management and the developers, and I can self-identify in that situation and say, oh wow, I can see that I'm trying to save them, or I'm trying to make them the enemy right now instead of looking at all of us as a team. That self-awareness piece can help. If not, then that can be a place where you as the agency owner could have an educational moment with the PM or with me in
hmm
this example. And you could pull me aside and say, it's really interesting, what's happening with you when you're thinking about, Tim, or you're thinking about Lisa or Bob. And then you can really help me go through a sense of very light self-discovery So that way I'm understanding like my role in creating that tension between the teams and to give me the option to drop the rope. And then if it's a much bigger cultural thing and you as the owner have the skill set and the comfort to do it, you could actually facilitate something, because typically when there's a drama triangle going on, if someone is in one of the three quadrants, they may be unknowingly continuing to replicate that behavior. So it could be an opportunity to pull in the other teams that are involved so they can understand their part in it and they can take back ownership of what's theirs and what's not theirs.
Interesting. And I'm going to play a protagonist for a second and say that
please.
not every agency is as touchy-feely as that to spend time and energy in worrying about the issues, a triangle that shows up, between team members. They're very, I don't even know if literal is the right word, but, I want the work done. I don't care about the drama. Knock it off, work it out yourselves. You're costing us money, or like what, you're jeopardizing a client. So let's assume that's half, if not more, of the agencies that exist. Are there things that owners can kind of become aware of to shift themselves and their culture towards being a little, and I don't mean the word touchy-feely in a negative or derogatory way anyway. I just, you know what I mean? Like there are different vibes, and some of that is just not going to flow with a lot of cultures.
And what you're describing is the environment that I grew up in, and very much the perspective that I came from. So my a little bit of background, and then I'll get to where your question is my dad was a drill sergeant for a period of time in the Army, the reserves. So I grew up under that command and control, like that. There's work that needs to be done, and if you don't do the work, there will be a lot of, like, a big price to pay for it. And what I found is the more that I tried to operate from that command and conquer model, the less effective I was as a manager and or a leader. And that as I softened and I learned more of these skills, one of the things that I've had reflected back to me is people love working with me because they feel seen, heard, and understood. And when people feel like that, they want to continue to be loyal, not only to the people that they're working with, but to the organization. And when I brought some of these tools into a project team, for example, I had one of the people come back to me afterwards and they said, one of the exercises I briefly brought the team through was one of the best team building exercises they had ever experienced at the agency, because other people weren't doing these things. So the intriguing part for me, and I'll bring in a visual aid for a second. A lot of the time, as owners, you may be in this space where you're something feels a little bit off, or something doesn't quite feel right. It may be with your team, it may be with a client, it may be with a vendor. And if we're approaching everything from a closed mindset, like, we're going to have less than ideal results. Now, the tools and the value of why I think conscious leadership is great is because it takes us from this closed mindset into an expanded mindset. And when we get into this expanded mindset, the world looks like a much different place. And even if you were to reflect back as an owner on 2024, I believe this has been one of the most challenging times for agencies in recent history. And if you go into 2025 with that same mindset, you may likely get the same results that you got in 2024. Whereas if you can shift into this space of, what's going on in my body when I start to think about things, that's an easy step to begin with. And it can be a very scary and uncomfortable place to go in, especially if you don't have a good relationship with your body, which, again, this gets kind of touchy-feely, and it kind of gets to that point that you talked about. But the results speak for themselves. When I've gone in from a place of not looking at people or things as a problem, and I look at them as an opportunity, like, things immediately shift for me. Then I'm looking at, well, how can I stay solution focused instead of problem focused?
Yeah. And these are all key components of what a true leader is defined as. And even, backing up a couple of sentences of what you said, is there are leaders that, they just want to execute, that command and control leadership. But in my experience, the best leaders I've ever, operated with or operated under, or even had the opportunity to groom myself, they are seeing other people as they are. They're nurturing them, they're mentoring them, they're grooming them. They're saying, I'm not threatened by you. I want you to learn and grow and become more, integral in what we do. So owners kind of need to shift into that space as well and see the opportunities that they have with their team.
Exactly. And I don't always like to go back to demographics or, this new generation. But if you look at the values and the things that Gen Z want coming into the workplace, it's a stark contrast to a lot of the generations before it. Whereas, baby boomers would put their heads down. Gen X revolted a little bit against the authority type of baby boomers, but still like really focused on getting their work done. Millennials were starting to stretch a little bit. And then with Gen Z coming in, I mean, it's changing the landscape dramatically, where I've worked on projects and people would have an off day, like their coffee wasn't made right, or something that would seem kind of silly to you and I, but would wreck their whole day. And by using these tools, I remember one situation where had a rough client meeting, and I pulled one of our creative directors aside afterwards and created a space to just let them be human. And not only did their human side show up, but then they flourished after the conversation. And it was very much just me creating the space, using the tools I had to say, hey, what was going on? Let's explore a little bit about what that was like for you. And we got to a really beautiful place where they were seeing that feelings they were having inside, one of which was fear, was really preventing them from performing on a project. And that's something that I believe at the end of the day is we're all corporate athletes. Even though I know corporate is typically used with big organizations, the way we take care of ourselves improves the way that we can show up in the workplace. And to kind of go back to something we talked about before, as an agency owner, you're like the coach, or you're the main person for your team. And you're the one, even if you don't see it, if you hear about it, you have the opportunity to help your individual performers perform at their best.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of analogize that as the coach, and you look at a lot of football coaches; they're just super out of shape. Most not, you know what I mean, but so many are. And unfortunately, I'm a Giants fan, and our head coach over the past year, he went through a massive transformation, and now looks far more physically fit than he has the past few years, and whatever. And so, it sets the tone of what to expect from the rest of your people. And whether that's mind, body, spirit, like whatever the different areas are. And you talk about like what those foundations of health that need to, be integrated into different areas of people's lives.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, so this is such an interesting topic, and something that I kind of had an idea about before, because I grew up as an athlete. Like I swam in high school. I was a D1 swimmer for a little while. I've done adventure racing. I've done orienteering, volleyball, all sorts of things. And the amazing thing is, if I can come to the table, like if I lift a really heavy weight in the gym in the morning, that may be the hardest thing that I will do all day. Like if I pick up 100 pounds off the ground or 200 pounds off the ground, and I can really focus on that and do that, then I know the rest of my day is going to be much easier. Or if I can get through like a hard rowing workout in the morning, like a interview on a podcast or talking to a client or everything else, like the volume goes down. Now, physical fitness is just one part of it, because I realize people listening to this, like maybe physical fitness isn't an option for them. It gets back to nutrition. It gets back to mental health. And I think post-COVID, we've very much fallen into a space of some form of grieving. Now, some of us may have like very real things that have happened, like loss of a loved one, loss of a job, loss of something else, or transitioning where what you did before is not working now. That's another form of grief. But we don't have the collective conscience to be aware of the fact that we're grieving. And if we aren't addressing these things, they come out sideways. So the point that you mentioned about the Giants coach what could have potentially been happening with them is their stress level. I mean, football tends to be very stressful, especially as a head coach. They could have been eating their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
They could have been doing a variety of things. And as an agency owner, this is critical. If you are not taking care of yourself, you cannot successfully run the agency in the way it deserves to be run. And I say that with all the love and compassion and understanding. Like, this is a stressful space. Now, some of us get excited. We love solving client problems. We love solving challenges. But if you, there's one agency owner where they'll jump on a line and they'll be like, well, back-to-back meetings, and I've had like 2 pieces of lettuce.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you are not understanding how your lack of self-care shows up and is a disservice to all the people around you.
Yeah. I have the same thing with many clients that I coach, where it's like, oh, I'm back to back all day long. I don't know if I'll have time to eat. Well, you can control. I had a boss. It was the last boss I had before I went on my own. It was the most toxic workplace I've ever been. But the one thing that this guy did was time block properly. He blocked his calendar for working out in the morning, for lunch every day, for dinner with his family every day, like drill sergeant style. Like, do not impede on these. And agency owners can do that as well. Like, why
100%.
are we allowing clients or even our PMs or whoever to overrun our entire calendar and our entire day? And that's not healthy.
And that, that time blocking piece that you mentioned, I think that's really important. And it's not just for agency owners. If you're a creative director listening to this, if you're anyone in the organization, finding blocks of time. For example, there's a PM with an agency that I'm doing some consulting with, where the PM was getting overworked. The agency owner was trying to figure out if they should bring in another resource. I sat down with the PM and we broke things down, and we were able to figure out, it's a busy time of the project. Like, you just have a lot of busy projects happening at once and things are going to drop off. And the message they took away from that is, well, it's just really hard right now. Mm-hmm. Instead of actually looking at their overall schedule and realize, even when this calms down, they were still going to be over allocated or over resourced. And if we're not taking responsibility for ourselves and actually speaking up, like, it's very common in the agency space. And I remember billing for 80 hours in a week back when I worked in the big agency space. And it was just, the work had to get done.
Mm-hmm.
But my self-care was awful, even to the point of where I tried to prioritize it. And I went in for a massage. And I remember walking out of the massage more stressed than when I had gone in.
Yeah, because you spent time on the bed thinking about, what calls am I missing? What emails am I missing? What am I going to have to catch up on? And it's the same when we say, oh, I'm going to take a week off. Well, it takes 2 weeks to get ready for the week off, and then 2 weeks to play catch up. And most owners don't unplug for that time off anyway.
Well, and that time off is so important, because we live in a world where it's always on. And it's very easy to point fingers and to look at technology. But I'm going to date myself a little bit here. But I mean, I remember, like, I didn't have a cell phone in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of that is there was like freedom and space to just like show up. And like, there was a sense of adventure. Like, I would meet friends at the mall, and like, we're going to meet at this store at this time. And like, maybe you hit traffic, or maybe you have car trouble, or something else happens. And then the adventure is to find them. And now we've entered into a world of immediate response, where I can pick up just about any device, and either someone can get a hold of me or I can get a hold of someone. And we haven't evolved. Like, our brains just don't understand that by staying connected, by staying in the machine or in the space all the time, it takes such a toll on us.
Yeah. That sense of adventure of like, when's the last time a kid just knocked on another kid's door and was like, hey, do you want to come out and play? Or they know where they are, just through finding, tracking each other on their phones. I love, I used to binge watch Mad Men a few times the seasons through, and I got envious of the guy who would just middle of the day go to the movies and unplug. Nobody knew where he was. Like, you can't have that anymore.
No.
So.
No, I mean, especially with clients, and this is a challenge I see between PMs and agency owners, where an agency owner will be like, a client's having a problem, it's the end of the world, we're in a panic, we're going to lose them. And a PM, if they're level-headed, will say, okay, well, let me take a look at what's going on. Like maybe it's not as big of an emergency,
Yeah.
but from an agency owner's perspective, what ends up happening is you can get into this mindset, and again, you get into this contracted space, and if you're looking at everything from a contracted space where a client's complaining about something or something has happened, it's taking us from this space of creativity and magic into, oh no, the world is ending, like I'm going to lose the client, other clients are going to leave, my business is going to close. And again, it's when we operate from that space that we're not making good decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. You get in the panic mode, you get into worst case scenario mode, and the creative juices aren't able to really look at things from a open-minded standpoint of, all right,
Mhm.
what are the problems that we need to find solutions for, and what's the best case scenarios? And you're working more in a fear driven as opposed to like success motivated, or you're in that scarcity mindset again. And yeah, it all crumbles down around that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe you have a creative background,
Hmm.
and keeping that in mind, creativity, although it can thrive under pressure and you can create great things, when you're creating like that magic, when you're creating that piece that clients are paying for, the more space and openness and time that you have for that to matriculate through, to really think about it, that's the magic. And
Yeah.
we're doing so much to like close off that stream of magic, or to close off that energy pipeline, that again comes back to why I think these commitments and tools are so necessary today.
Yeah. So I think the bottom line here is leaders, whether they're owners or leaders within the ecosystem of a creative space, need to find ways to consciously open their minds and their hearts and bring more of that good energy into the workspace and the culture
Mhm.
and the self-care. And it's a process, but if they can implement one thing, block out lunch for the entire team, or start your day with a walk around the block, or like one of these things that's going to open the mind a little bit, everybody benefits.
Yeah, I'd say start and then stay committed to the path, because
Hmm.
what ends up happening is, uh, I'll get a little new agey and spiritual for a second. It's um, being spiritual or doing this type of work is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's not for everyone, and you should probably avoid it at all costs. But once you start, keep
Hmm.
doing it. And what I find is I have self doubts all the time about this work. Oh, I tried this tool with an agency owner and all I got was defensiveness back. I tried having that hard conversation with someone and it didn't go the way I expected it to. But one sample size is not reflective of all the work. And the piece that I really want to end with is, the more I've found that I've embraced this, the more feedback that I've gotten from the world around me. And one of the things that my late mom had mentioned was, I was a totally different person since starting doing this work,
Hmm.
and that she didn't recognize me in the best way possible. And I've received that reflection from friends. I've received that reflection from other people that I've worked with. The deeper I go with this, the more results I'm getting in the world around me. And the weird part is because I'm working so hard on myself, on my inner game, that the outer game is changing.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Before we wrap up, I'm going to hit you with
Yeah.
a couple of random
Yeah, please.
non woo woo related questions.
Cool.
So, first is, what is something that you are binging these days that you can't get enough of? Whether it's a book, an audio book, a podcast, a
Yeah.
hobby, a show, or whatever.
Yeah. So I'll start with something a little bit more um, less juicy. With
Hmm.
there's a book called Conscious Accountability,
Okay.
where I think like accountability is just one of those things that was driven into me when I was younger, and I realized it wasn't driven into everyone. And so I'm always trying to find out ways to like learn more about it. On the flip side, or the more self-indulgent side, I've been really digging Reacher on Amazon Prime.
They just
And
announced a new season coming out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a little bit more graphic than I expected, but there's something really cool about watching someone who is embodying a lot of traits of masculinity that I think are really cool to see on the screen.
Yeah, I like the show. He's a good actor. It's a fun show. What's a tool that you recently integrated into your life, physical, digital, personal, professional, that you look back and you're like, how the heck did I live without this thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if there's one single tool. It's much more of a philosophy of the more I learn, the less I know. And coming back to this space of, I do some moonlighting with a place called the Denver Zen Den, and we use light, sound, and vibration to create state changes for people. And the intriguing thing is, the more I've opened up to the space of letting things unfold without forcing them to unfold, the better off that it ends up being at the end of the day. Just relying on, I've got the skills, I've got the ability, I've got the mindset. I can just set the frame or the container and then just let things play out and pivot as they move forward. So again, it's less of a tool and more of a philosophical thing.
No, listen, that's a tool as well. And then finally, looking back on a younger version of Matthew Fox, what's something that you would advise yourself of?
That it's all going to be okay. I think it's very much a sense of always thinking doom was around the corner as a kid, and that there's very, very few things. And I've actually spent time in the medical space of finding people who were in a life and death situation and having had to make decisions based off of that. Unless you're in that situation, 99.9% of what we deal with during the day really isn't as big of a deal as our lizard brain or as the things in our head make it out to be. And if I could just remind that younger version of myself that it's going to be okay, this too shall pass, and I have a really good support system around me to make sure that I'll be okay.
I love that. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you and everything you shared with us today.
Likewise, it was such a pleasure. And if anyone has any questions about anything they've heard, please reach out. I'm always happy to answer questions.
Matthew's contact info will be in the show notes.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.